Good evening, Browns fans, and welcome to OBR Weekly. It's Wednesday, 7 o'clock. I'm Barry, and that right over there is the legend, Mr. Freddie Greetham. How you doing, Fred?
Doing great, Barry. Glad to be back with you.
Yeah. We had to improvise last week with you not here, but it's great to have you back. We've got a couple of subjects we want to talk about, but mostly what we want to talk about are your comments and questions. So, as always, hit us up in the chat room and we will feature those as we get into the program. Fred, not a tremendous amount of news happening this week. Nyheim Hines was released. The cap went up, which we'll talk about in a little bit, but it seems like everybody's just sort of hanging out waiting for the combine.
Yeah, usually that's kind of the unofficial kickoff to everything. That's when everybody, they get together for the Pro Bowl and the Super Bowl, but this is more now the new season.
Right.
You have the Super Bowl in the past, and this is where the agents and the the front office people interact, and a lot of deals get struck, next week in Indianapolis.
Yeah.
Even though you can't talk till March 10th or whatever.
Right. Yeah, you can't do that. That would be bad. But just, in case somebody is talking, we'll be on top of it, trying to separate the real from the fictional in our insider forums and on our front page and all that sort of good stuff. Chat is already hopping, particularly in YouTube. So if you Twitchers are out there twitching away, feel free to hit us up with any comments and questions, and we will get back to them. But let's talk about some of the news of the week, Fred. Such as it is, the big news today is that the salary cap went up as it continues to go up. 25 or so extra $1 million available to spend for the Cleveland Browns. Cap will wind up somewhere between 277 and 281 million. This is not a shock. It's a little bit higher than people thought it might be, but nothing that Andrew Berry and crew haven't been planning for all along, right, Fred?
Yeah, that's one of the things about this group. They're pretty much good at managing the cap and spending the money as long as Jimmy Haslam's willing to continue to do so. What the challenge has been in spending it properly on the right players. But it does, if you use a baseball analogy, if you're a Indians, Guardians, whatever fan, you get a little frustrated from that front when you see the Yankees and baseball and the Dodgers. There is no cap, and they just cover up their mistakes with just go getting the next guy. If it doesn't matter if they have a Deshaun Watson that becomes a bust, they just go get the next guy until they get it right. Whereas, you see Cleveland doing getting the guy with the Tommy John surgery and hoping he'll be your starter a year from now and that kind of stuff. So the Browns spend the money. They're like the Yankees. It's just not been on the right players, especially in free agency, or in the draft or whatever it may be. But yes, 25 million, you talk about dead cap, that almost assumes, half of a dead cap for the year of a guy like Watson.
Right. So it helps.
And that's built into their planning.
Mm-hmm.
Why they kick it down the road, because that money comes back and the value today is more important than down the road.
Exactly. So they've been planning on this cap going up for a little while, but that doesn't mean that they're in great shape. If you look at this is from overthecap.com. I think that's it, OTC. And it shows the Browns in the next to worst cap situation as it stands today. This is before the cap is finalized, the numbers before the cap is finalized, before the numbers which came out today. And to Fred's point, look there in the fourth column for active cap spending. They are spending $294 million. I think that is number one in the league, ahead of the Seahawks. Jimmy Haslam, not afraid to spend money at all. It's just a question of picking the right people, which should be easy given the number of scouts that they have, right, Fred?
Yeah, and the Saints obviously are listed right below the Browns. But think about this: if you're a guy that licks your chops about free agency, think of the last 5, 6, 7 years. Every year they say the Saints are destitute and they got to cut all their stars. And there was when Marshawn Lattimore was in his prime, and and Michael Thomas and all their players. They're going to have to cut all these guys. Just kind of like what now. If you read some of these national columns on the Browns, they're going, well, they can't do anything in free agency. They're going to have to cut all their players just to get under. And then it doesn't happen that way in the real world. The Saints, I learned that several years ago, because you're like, oh, that they got to get rid of Marshawn Lattimore. You might as well get him. And that was, that was how it was in free agency. And you wonder how in the world they always do that. Well, they're doing, similar to what the Browns are doing. And, so that's where it goes. It's kind of salary cap imaginations or gymnastics or whatever. And ultimately you got to account for it. But this is built into the Browns model, as Jack Duffins pointed out, by kicking it down the road when the cap keeps going up. It's not as big of a deal as it is today.
Yeah, right. Paying someone $40 million may have been, a huge chunk of your cap back in 2021, but in 2025, when the cap is significantly larger, it's a smaller percentage and, more manageable. But this doesn't mean that the Cleveland Browns are going to be going out and, absorbing the cap hits for Myles Garrett and Deshaun Watson this year, are going out and spending, like on a T. Higgins. I think he's out of their price range this year with the cap that they have left. Is that your opinion, Fred, or we waiting to see?
Well, yeah, I mean, the Bengals have already leaked out that they're going to franchise him. He might be the only franchise free agent. But every time we get to this time of the year, everybody drools over all the free agents. But lo and behold, they never make it to the market. If they do, it's usually like a bidding war, as you've seen in recent years, for anybody that does make it to the free agency that's top of the shelf. But yeah, I mean, that'd be the second year in a row, but because the wide receivers have gone up so much, I think they've calculated, if they can't get him signed, they can keep the band together at least another year. So I don't think Higgins will make it to the market. And if he does, it's going to be a feeding frenzy. And I just think, even though the Browns have room, I don't know if you can pull it off.
Right.
If it was a trade, but the Bengals aren't going to sign him and trade him to the Browns.
No.
That's where the Browns do their best work, is the Amari Cooper, the Jerry Jeudy, get a wide receiver high price that a team doesn't want to extend for whatever reason, or feels they're in decline like Cooper, and Browns are willing to trade that 5th, 6th round pick and then redo their contract and make it work, and they get a good player. That's been at wide receiver. They did that with Cooper, Jerry Jeudy, even going back before Andrew Berry, Jarvis Landry, and to some extent Elijah Moore, but he was on the rookie contract, so they had to give up more to get him. But that is the surest way to get a proven talent. And I like that because, there's no guarantee in the draft. We've seen them pick wide receiver after wide receiver in the third round
Right.
that didn't make it or wasn't that great. A veteran is proven. You know what you're getting, and so
known quantity.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we have a question here about whether we think Andrew Berry pulls that off again. Obviously, we don't know what's going through his mind, but I assume he'll be opportunistic with trades, especially with the incredible number of draft picks and draft capital that the Cleveland Browns have.
Yeah, I don't know if Cooper Kupp, comes to mind. That's a guy that the Rams said they want to trade, and he's got a big salary. If that's the type of thing you can do, if they would feel, I don't, they might think he's too old. I don't know. That's what their job is to do, is sift through all the rosters of players like a Jerry Jeudy that they feel they can make that move. As it turns out last year, that was the biggest offseason move, was trading for Jerry Jeudy, and they did that before free agency even opened.
Right.
And so that, to me, could be the same route they go, not just at wide receiver, but any position. Because, again, if a guy becomes available, all you have to do is deal with the money, and you sign the contract extension and you reshuffle the deck so you get that guy relatively inexpensive, especially in 25 and 26 when you're still under the shadow of the Deshaun Watson contract.
Right. Well, as we're talking about trades and we're talking about draft capital and all that sort of wonderful stuff, boy, I've been holding a pretty firm line that the Browns should not trade Myles Garrett. He's the best defensive player in football, in my opinion. But, boy, is it tempting. Here's a mock draft, Fred, from Pro Football Focus. And they had the Cleveland Browns trade Myles Garrett for the 12th pick in this year's draft and a first rounder next year. And look what they're able to put together, according to the mock draft simulator over at Pro Football Focus. They land Abdul Carter, Will Johnson, Josh Connerly Jr., a solid tackle. Travion Henderson, of course, he's a Buckeye, so he's awesome. And Jalen Milroe still available in the third round. I guess my question for you, Fred, is if you are guaranteed of a return like this, if you traded Garrett and went into the draft with those picks, would you go ahead and do it? Is this tempting enough for you to deal off Myles Garrett to get a Will Johnson to really solidify your cornerback core?
I don't think so. I mean, I'm more interested in the dilemma of getting Abdul Carter to go with Myles Garrett. I read these stories out of Dallas. The Cowboys have to do whatever they can to get Myles Garrett to go with Micah Parsons, and then they have the best, most devastating pass rush in the NFL. Well, if Abdul Carter is the next Myles Garrett type or Micah Parsons, why don't you just keep him in-house? And then you have that. We saw what the Eagles did in the Super Bowl. Patrick Mahomes became a non-factor because he couldn't do anything. And if you have a swarming, aggressive pass rush, which again, that's assuming Abdul Carter is that guy. I mean, I remember when a guy named Courtney Brown was drafted with the first pick in the draft from Penn State, and he was a great player, but he was injured a lot, and he never really was able to get uncorked, and you can't factor all that in. I just hate to weaken a position, with unknown commodities. That's my problem with draft picks. It sounds great. Oh, we get 3 first-round draft picks. In 5 years, I keep going back to this. The Browns have drafted 37 players, 1 Pro Bowler.
Right.
There's no guarantee any of these guys are going to be great, Milroe, okay. I think you have to solve the biggest question. I've been saying it forever. is at quarterback.
Sure.
The Browns went 3-14. They were winless, I think, with Miles, or one-win team with Miles. As great as he is, you got to have a quarterback. And unless that trade brings you a starting quarterback, and Milroe down there, I don't know if you can guarantee he's going to be Lamar Jackson or whatever they're saying he's, or is he Anthony Richardson? So, yeah, I don't want to trade him, but if you're going to trade him, then you look at the list. Who's a starting quarterback in the NFL right now, you know? Or that trade moves you up to number one and you can take Abdul Carter and Shandir Sanders or Cam Ward and get your quarterback if that's it. Or look at a team in the league that has a starting quarterback and trade for him. I don't know how far down the list you can go, but I bet you can't even get in the top 15 to get a starting quarterback for Myles Garrett. You know, on the surface, you'd say, oh, you could trade Myles Garrett for Matthew Stafford. Well, I doubt if the Rams would do that, even though he was the, 14th best quarterback last year.
Right.
You know, they might, but you know what I'm saying? If you're more interested in a younger guy like Jordan Love, you know, guys like that, I doubt if they do it, even though they're not the best at their position like Garrett is, because of the premium of the quarterback position. And so that's where I keep coming back. First of all, I think it's cost prohibitive, you know, with we've talked about that forever with the, you know, with the dead cap and trying to get around all that. And why in the world would you accommodate him just to make him happy when he's a real asset for your team? But if you did do that and you could work around the cap, it's got to be a starting quarterback, not a hope the guy makes it type of deal.
Rocky Balboa says here that apparently Stump Mitchell was on a video stream earlier today. He says the Browns should go back to Flacco. Do you think that's an answer, Fred, at this point? I am really skeptical. He had a great run, but to me, he's not a guy I want to base my 2025 season on.
Well, he's 2 years removed from being here now. I mean, last year I thought, you know, as it turned out, he probably have been a pretty good answer. And I think the reason they didn't bring him back was they just didn't want to hear the boos, you know, every time Watson threw an interception or something. And then Watson gets hurt. And then I really kind of thought Jameis Winston was the right play. I thought he could do everything Flacco could do, and he was 9 years younger. And I don't think Flacco is necessarily a non-interception throwing quarterback. We saw that in the playoffs. If he would have had a different playoff game, he might have, you know, they might have brought him back. But I think that proved everybody. So no, I'm not thinking 2 years later from a guy who everybody felt was washed up. He's got a reprieve. You know, he's got to be 40 or 41. You know, for a lot of reasons, I don't think Aaron Rodgers and Deshaun Watson would fit in the same quarterback room. But I think he's a better option than Joe Flacco as far as a player. But I don't think he would want to be developing or the mentor to a rookie. You know, he wants to go and start somewhere. And that's why the Jets, you know, moved on from him. So that creates competition for Kirk Cousins, you know, and whoever is out there, because the Jets are looking for the same thing. So I don't think Flacco. I would rather have any of a number of the options I've mentioned: Kirk Cousins, Derek Carr.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, much more palatable from my point of view. But when it comes to trading Myles Garrett, Jason Lockenfora, who, I'll reserve judgment, but Jason Lockenfora says, I think Myles Garrett is absolutely going to be traded, and I believe the Philadelphia Eagles are as well positioned and motivated as anyone to land him. So you got that from La Canfora. Diana Rossini in The Athletic said that the Browns are subtly, essentially to paraphrase her, subtly listening to offers, saying no, but listening a little bit. Are you seeing any break in the blockade, in the trade blockade, Fred, when it comes to Myles Garrett, or do you think that people are just speculating at this point?
Speculating, because there's one problem. How do you get around the reality? It's a great thing to write. I'm sure every team that has a site like ours is sitting here salivating on what can we do to get Myles Garrett, and
Right.
he's available and all that. But I've said this before, and I'll probably write something about this, is like, why are Browns fans so excited to rebuild? That 1-31 seasons, those 2 years could not have been fun. And
Yeah.
it's all on hoping you get a whole bunch of good players in the draft. And we look back, and that 1-31, I think you could say it netted you Myles Garrett, Baker Mayfield, Denzel Ward, Nick Chubb, basically. And I don't know, even if you could get that, is it worth 2 more years of tanking? Is what you'd have to do in order to trade Garrett, because you cannot get around the dead cap unless you wait until June, and then by then free agency and the draft is over. So all you're getting is stuff for next year, unless somebody gives you some players, in June. But I doubt anybody you acquire is going to be as good as Myles Garrett. And you haven't solved the quarterback position. I keep coming back to that. If you can solve the quarterback position, okay, I'm open to a trade. But why would you do it just to do it? To make the guy happy? That's not their job, is to make the guy happy. And I think he's kind of part of his motivation is he saw OBJ. Oh, I'm upset. I want to play in the Super Bowl. Oh, cut me. And the Browns accommodated him, got out of and he was able to go pick his team and go to the Rams after they had clinched playoff and they're in the Super Bowl. Well, this is a different player. OBJ, they were moving on from him. Plus, that was in the middle of the season, and they felt like, they had to do it. I would have sent him home and said, hey, goodbye, good luck. You're sitting at home.
Right. Yeah, they were very accommodating with OBJ, and now, of course, you see other players wanting to do sort of the same thing. But when it comes to the quarterback, we're going to get into Cam Ward and Shadur Sanders. They were both in the news this week, not for any real accomplishment or anything. Shadur Sanders was in the news because he plays the Browns exclusively on Madden. That's supposed to indicate that he would love to become a Cleveland Brown. And Cam Ward was in the news because he basically went out and said, I'm going to make everybody regret if they don't draft me. Everybody in front of me regret if they don't draft me, which is something we've heard from before from luminaries such as Josh Rosen and others. It doesn't move the needle for me at all, Fred. But we have a lot of people in the comments here talking about, the need to get that quarterback, as you pointed out, as being absolutely paramount. Getting rid of a quarterback was in the news this week, as Pro Football Talks' Mike Florio spun a scenario where Myles Garrett and Deshaun Watson were traded to a team like the Commanders with salary cap space, once again to absorb all of that, trading that contract, paying a big price this year in terms of the salary cap. Shaq Duffin points out here, if you traded him before June 1st, you'd have $170 million in dead cap, which kind of wipes out the whole notion. Florio then came back and said, well, if you trade him after June 1st, The cap hit will be significantly less, and you might be able to get away with that. But if you're, you talk about, Fred, you talk about fans not wanting to go through a reboot. Two guys who really don't want to go through a reboot are Kevin Stefanski and Andrew Berry, because they might lose their jobs. I don't see any way like a scenario like this plays out, despite Florio's protestations. Can you see this happening?
No, I mean, again, everybody's talking about as a fan of another team. If the Browns just call up the Roger Goodell, maybe that would be it, and say, you know what? We're just going to sit this year out. We suck. We're always going to suck. We're just going to give up and take us out of the equation for the year. That's the only reason you do this stuff. How does this help your team trading Myles Garrett for basically just to get out of the salary? The whole thing is getting out of the salary. It's
Right.
like they have accounted – whether Watson was a Pro Bowl player or he was what he is, they had that already accounted in their salary, in their budget. So as tough as that is, they don't need to get relief from Watson this year. They can move around it. They are moving around it. And so I think the issue is the Garrett thing. And like I said, the only way you can even feasibly get around the Garrett deal is wait until June. And I don't see how that helps you at all. Unless you
Right.
come out of free agency with nothing and you feel like, man, we couldn't get one guy we wanted. We couldn't get the quarterback we wanted. We're just getting an also-ran backup. So, we're going to have a bad year anyway. So, okay. Let's just play the draft picks and, hope for next year. If you take that approach, then I can see you trading. But I just think that Browns fans don't want to see the team purposely tank. I think competent quarterback play. I've said it until I'm blue in the face. If you would have had Flacco playing like he did even in that interim, or even Jameis Winston the first 7 games, I bet you they'd have been 3-4 or 4-3, and they would have been right in the thick. The season was over because they played Watson for 7 games. Despite him getting hurt, they were done. 1-6. There is no hope to make the playoffs. Everybody in the roster knew that, and the record spiraled out of control. Throw in whatever you name. I think a competent quarterback in those first 7 games, you would have been able. You might not have been 11-6, but you might have been 8-9 or 9-8, and you're playing down to the, final game with a chance. And I think I would rather have that than another 3-14 season.
Yeah. I mean, the dictate to reboot would have to come from Haslam, right? Because he would have to tell Berry and Stefanski that their jobs are safe, even in the case for reboot. He would be willing to absorb the hit, financially from, having another bad season. That's a owner decision. I don't think Andrew Berry and team can make that.
I don't think it's on the minds of any of them.
Yeah.
And being the devil's advocate, they were 11-6 a year ago and went to the playoffs. They had pretty much the same team this past year. Obviously they didn't have Flacco, but the rest of the guys, they brought back everybody, including, like 19 of the 22 starters. Now, maybe they weren't as good as they were in 11-6. I tend to think they weren't as good as they were that year, but they weren't as bad as they were at 3-14. I think they're somewhere in the middle, as most NFL teams are without an elite NFL quarterback.
Right.
You're kind of in that middling. And so that's why I just think signing a veteran that's able to you should go all out in March and do everything you can to get the starting quarterback in free agency or a trade. And then you move on to the draft and you attack that like you don't even have that starter. And you draft. I kind of honestly like the plan the Falcons did. They went crazy for Kirk Cousins. I mean, you talk about the Deshaun Watson deal. They gave a 36-year-old or whatever he was 4 years, 180 million, and most of it guaranteed. And then they turned around with the 8th pick and drafted Michael Penix. Things went south with Cousins, injury or whatever. They went to Penix. They felt he was ready. So you don't have to throw the rookie out there originally. And so that's why I just think that's, one of the things, the way you approach this. And maybe there's another option better, when you look around the league. But as far as I think that, I would much rather try to go all in to right the ship than to just write off the 25, 26 seasons. And from the ownership, he's got a dome he's trying to build. He's trying to build a big Jimmy World out in Berea and all this. I don't think they want necessarily to have a 2-15 team, again next year, or 3-14 or whatever. So I just think they're going to spend money and they're going to try to right the ship.
Yeah,
but I think if you get a competent quarterback, I think that adds game wins to just there. I mean, I can look at, I don't know how many games they lost because of the quarterback last year.
Yeah.
Well,
I think that they've effectively blamed the season on Deshaun Watson, and justifiably so. I want to talk about a couple little statistics that I came across and just get your reaction to them. NFL.com rated teams in terms of their tackling efficiency in 2024, and the Cleveland Browns under Schwartz were dead last, and they're dead last for the second straight year, and pretty far behind. Denzel Ward had trouble. A lot of people had trouble on the Browns defense with tackling. You look at the teams with the best tackling efficiencies: Kansas City, Detroit, the teams that were competitive late into the season and into the playoffs. And of course, the Cleveland Browns are completely out of it. How in the world, Fred, do we turn this around? Does it require changing people, or can coaching do it, or whatever? Because the tackling has been pretty awful these last couple of years.
Yeah, I agree. I saw that. And, I don't know. There's a variety of factors, the type of players they have. A lot of them, they try to go for speed. And we all know Denzel Ward's slight. He gets hurt when he sticks his head in there. He's more out there for his pass coverage. You saw what happened with JOK. He's a little slight, again, athletic. I think they got to get that rectified. And as much as they look at analytics, they have to see that sticking out, is that under Kevin Stefanski, I'm not in watching other teams' training camps and regular season, but they sure don't seem to worry that much or spend a lot of time on tackling. And it seems to show here. That, along with pre-snap penalties, all that kind of stuff, to me, is coaching. And as much as we say, and I am on the record saying I think Kevin Stefanski is a pretty good coach, but a lot of this stuff is head scratching. The pre-snap penalties, the false starts, the lack of discipline and tackling and that stuff. So maybe all these coaches they should hire a tackling coach, somebody that just knows how to tackle. And I think a lot of it is because they try to get everybody to the regular season without getting injured. That's why else do they not tackle in training camp? Why else do they not play their starters in the preseason? Because they don't want them to get hurt. But then again, this kind of thing shows up. So I think if you don't practice, if I never tackle until I get to the game, I'm probably not going to be very good at it.
Right. Well, the Kansas City Chiefs, the Detroit Lions, the Baltimore Ravens, Pittsburgh Steelers, they were all in the top 5 in terms of tackling efficiency. All of them went to the playoffs. Granted, the Steelers didn't last very long again, but they had effective defenses, and the Cleveland Browns struggled. With regard to the pre-snap penalties that you talk about, here's a statistic from the 33rd team about teams with the worst third down conversion rates last year. And the Browns, again, were last. You put these two stats together, you get a 3-14 team, right? But I'd suggest that the Browns are dead last in this for one reason, because of all those pre-snap penalties. They're always 3rd and 7 or 3rd and 8 because somebody jumped offside. Is that the way it seems?
And no running game,
Right.
So you get a 2-yard run and you're 2nd and 8, and because at the beginning they were trying to pass first with Watson. He was getting sacked, or he was, not having no pickup because they were passing first. And you didn't really have a legitimate threat at running in the running game. Nick Chubb wasn't Nick Chubb. Jerome Ford would have a run here or there, but you didn't have a consistent running game. They finished at near the bottom in the running game. So that's why a lot of this stuff stands out that you got to get fixed. But as you mentioned here, a lot of this is coaching, tackling, pre-snap, penalties, those type of things. And so, yeah, you got to get them up. And I'll throw another one is the turnovers. 34 turnovers and only 12 takeaways. You finished negative 22, dead last. Some of that I think is luck on the takeaways, but I know that they try, and that falls into play sometimes with the tackling. They try to grab the ball out of the hand rather than tackle the guy. And so I think you got to do both, but you got to get more takeaways, because every time, that difference, it was like 34. That's like 2 or 3 possessions a game the defense is on the field extra that you didn't get off the field and put your offense another chance to score. And so a lot that all played into 3-14 for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. As Fumble 13 puts it in the chat, my shoulder into your waist and arms wrapped, you are going nowhere. The only thing that I would add to that, Fumble, is you need some core home fitness. I mean, you got to be strong in order to stop those charging running backs, and core home fitness will get you there with their adjustable dumbbells, which are the best on the planet. You hear me each week talking about Consumers Reports and all that sort of stuff. These are the best adjustable dumbbells on the planet. I mean, you don't have to go read a magazine to find this out. Just talk to anybody who owns them. They are the best that you can possibly get. So check out Core Home Fitness. They not only sell these dumbbells, they also sell the incline benches, the Glute Drive Plus, all kinds of products for your health and fitness. If you want to crush your goals in 2025, go to corehomefitness.com. Check out their videos. Check out their app. These guys have got it going on, and bring the gym home in 2025. Especially true because we do not want to go out in that big sloppy mess that's out there in Cleveland. So let's get to some questions. I brought a couple with me, but I've got like 14 or 15 I've marked. 14 or 15 I've marked. Thank you, World's Fastest Fat Man. That I've marked that we want to dive into. If you've got more, hit us up. We're going to drive through them. Alec White started us off with a proposal, trade number 2 in Watson and all his money for Trevor Lawrence. I was not a fan of this, as I responded in the chat. Mostly, obviously you can get a rookie on a 4-year, 5-year deal at quarterback with that number 2 pick. Plus, Trevor Lawrence just hasn't exploded like people expected him to in the NFL, right, Fred?
Yeah, and he got a bigger contract than Watson did. Maybe not guaranteed money, but his was like $55 million a year. I think even if you wanted to do this, it's we sound like we're always getting in the weeds, but the dead cap, the money, you can't do that. That's everybody wants to get rid of Watson, and I know why they do, but you can't do that. That's why you have to write it out, because of the dead cap and all that involved. Why would somebody want to absorb 100 whatever it is? But the Browns have to still deal with like 170 million in dead cap or whatever it is,
Right.
or 170 minus whatever Garrett's is, and it just, I don't think that works.
Then you have to pay Trevor Lawrence on top of that. He's not going to come cheap either. Spending a couple million on Kirk Cousins sure sounds appealing given the situation that the Browns are in right now.
Yeah, it's like 1.2 million, kind of like what Russell Wilson did. The Broncos paid his whole salary, and the Browns would get Cousins for 1.2 million. If he gets released March 12th or whenever his bonus is due, March 15th, the thing is, there's going to be competition for him. The Jets got rid of Rodgers. Rick Spielman, who was with him in Minnesota, is now working in the front office with the Jets. And they put out today, or they leaked out, they're interested in. They went hard on Cousins last year as a free agent, and he went to the Falcons. So it's not going to just be, hey, Kirk, come on in. He would be very appealing because his numbers were better than any of the Browns, and he finished 1 touchdown, 9 interceptions. Turned out in those 5 games that he had a bum shoulder. I think he would stabilize. That's why I think he's the best option. But they're going to have choices, and if he's released, he gets to go wherever he wants to. So there's no guarantee you're going to get him. There's no guarantee that things would work out to get Derek Carr, Geno Smith, a lot of the suspects out there. But the only guy that could be available, that would be free agency would be Daniel Jones, unless they let Sam Darnold go to free agency. So,
right.
There's going to be competition. The Steelers also probably, unless they're going to commit to Justin Fields, are probably going to be in the mix to try to get a Cousins or somebody like that too. So Browns have to get their pitch together. The only way you can avoid it is do the trade, but Carr and Cousins have no trade clauses. So,
and Cleveland not that appealing a destination at this point in time. Brian Atkins says take a quarterback at number 2. He's pretty confident what he wants to do. Fred, as of February 19th, 2025, are you circling in on what you want the Cleveland Browns to do at number 2? Or are you waiting to see what happens at the combine?
No, I'm coming out Friday with my 4th quarterback projection, but I want them to take a quarterback at number 2 because of why? If they evaluate Shedeur Sanders and Cam Ward, and they feel that one or both of them can be a franchise quarterback, you take one. If they feel that Sanders, Ward, Jalen Milroe, and Jackson Dart are all about the same, it really don't matter, then no, don't take one at 2. Take one, with another pick. But my reasoning is this. You hope you never draft at the top again.
Right.
If you do, then you're in play for a quarterback. You get a quarterback at number 2. He is under contract on the rookie deal for 4 years. It's not or 5 years. It's not the albatross. If you make a mistake and 2-3 years down, you say, this just wasn't the guy that we thought he was, you move on. Look at what the Cardinals did. They drafted Josh Rosen 10th, and the next year drafted Kyler Murray with the first pick. So it doesn't make it cost prohibitive. But even though they may not be ranked as good a quarterbacks as they were even last year, they're better than anything the Browns have now. Shedeur Sanders, I did a little research on him, and he's the most accurate quarterback in college football. He set a record. I think his career for 4 years was 71.4%. That kind of translates to the pro game, that he can make a quick decision. He's accurate. And he works with Kevin Stefanski's offense. Cam Ward, I think, everything I've studied and read is that he has more upside. I like Sanders has played 50 games, and that's translated into being able to be more successful quicker. So my point is, I said it earlier, free agency or trade market, I'd go all in March to get the best quarterback you can get. I wouldn't just say, I want to get Jacoby Brissett because he'd be a good backup.
Right.
And he could start a few. I would try to get Kirk Cousins, Derek Carr, whoever you can get that day one's your starter, and still draft your quarterback. Cam Ward, Shedeur Sanders. I wouldn't even mind say you got Cousins and he played the whole year and he did well and you guys were fighting for the playoffs. It doesn't bother me that the pick doesn't play. That seems to even work better. Instead of forcing them out there, as we've seen for 25 years with the Browns, oh, you're number one pick, we don't have anybody else, you're the starter. The 1 year they were going to do that was with Baker Mayfield, and then Tyrod Taylor got hurt. And I would say that of all the first-round pick quarterbacks the Browns have taken, he was the most ready to play day one, and their plan was to have him sit the whole year.
Right.
So I don't mind. Yeah, if Cousins or whoever you get just struggles, just like the Falcons did, he got hurt or whatever, and now you go to your quarterback of the future. And Penix had sat, and it probably did him well, and he played pretty well the last 4 or 5 games. So I don't think, especially if you get a Cousins on a $1.2 million deal, you got 2 legitimate options.
Yeah. It seems the Greetham philosophy here is, find a quarterback. All of the priorities rescinded. This is a year. Find a quarterback, right? There's be a healthy debate about whether Ward or Sanders is the guy, but like we've been saying here, Stefanski believes that Sanders is the guy to run his offense. Take him, just take him. Don't look back. Fumble 13 wants to know if you're going to be going to the combine, and we are waiting for the NFL Combine to approve credentials, but I assume Fred is going to be there next week, like he's been for many years here, going to the Combine. And we expect to hear from both Andrew Berry and Kevin Stefanski, right?
Yeah, Tuesday and Wednesday. I don't know which day is which, but I do know one is Tuesday and one is Wednesday. And then the interviews with the players, I think, start Wednesday. And so that's the plan. Get some video, get some, feedback, discussion, on the players. This first time since 21 that they've had a first round pick.
Right.
So, in 2022, we were over there talking to all the quarterbacks thinking they were going to draft a quarterback or, and then they traded after the combine was when the trade took place for Deshaun Watson. That threw the draft out the window. And so now they're back in it and they got 12 picks. So this is a chance to really reload and overhaul your roster. But as we've seen so many times, rookies don't always step right on the field and make a big impact. So free agency's first. And that's where I just think your biggest impact can be made early March, when you get that quarterback, take that off the table. And then you go into, ideally, I would like somehow be able to come out of there with a quarterback, in Abdul Carter, but I just think the quarterback trumps it. You can look at rankings and they might have Cam Ward as 15th or Sanders as 16th, but quarterbacks get pushed to the top because they're so hard to find. That's what I use that example. Myles Garrett, you could trade. If you went down the list 1 to 32, straight up, forget the money, one-on-one quarterback, Myles Garrett, I bet you nobody would part with their quarterback until you got maybe to the second half of the rankings, just
Yeah.
because that's how it goes. And that's why I'm saying Cam Ward, Shadur Sanders, you believe they can step in and be your quarterback, you take them, because you're not going to get a chance to get one of them if you don't take them with your first pick.
Right.
And there's no guarantee you're going to get them other guys. If you say, well, we really like Dart and Milrow, they could both get taken before you pick again. And if you say, well, it's tank for next year so we can get this guy, I've seen that road before. It never works out.
Right. World's Fastest Fat Man says, there been any news on any of our injuries? JOK, Holland Jones are all key players going into next year. We've not heard anything about any of them. Question's going to get asked undoubtedly of Stefanski and Barry next week in the combine about the health of those guys. I'm not expecting any answers. Are you, Fred?
It's a lot of fluff and a lot. You got to go and you got to cover it. But they talk around things, and I get it to some degree, but I don't understand with the injuries. I will say this: I was talking to somebody, Jones. I think is doing all right. He was at a St. Ignatius basketball game, I think, against St. Ed's, walking around and seemed to be talking to everybody. He's fine. Hall, I'd heard that his wasn't, major injury, and that's taken care of. The JOK one's the mystery.
Yeah.
Every time we ask, he said, you guys will be the first to know. And when it's appropriate, all the stuff was just not good, Nothing real positive about I think Stefanski said, do you think he'll play next year? And he says, I'm hopeful. I mean, I think you could have said a little more than that. You could have said, yeah, we think he'll be fine, or we think he'll play. I don't know. I mean, I really don't get the whole deal. I mean, it's like, okay, I had read somewhere from somebody that said they saw him. He's walking around, seems to be functioning normally, but there's a difference between being like you and I living our life as opposed to an NFL football player. So There is 6 months till the season. I mean, I don't know. I mean, if his career's over, that does change somewhat of your defense. I mean, and that's my conspiracy thing out there was with Myles saying if he knew, because sometimes the players know, if he felt or knew that JOK was done, that's probably the second best. You could argue Ward or JOK behind Garrett. If you lost another player like that, now your defense is, hurting. Even though the linebacker isn't been prioritized, that's a big blow. And when Jordan Hicks last year said, we're all praying for a miraculous recovery, that was like a week after the injury when some of us thought he was going to play maybe in the next week or something. And we never, I'm sure he was told to not talk anymore.
Right. You're really
So,
taking
I
it
don't
back
know.
with a statement like that. I mean, that sounds awful, to hear something like that. Like
That
it could
was
be really severe.
within a week. That was like before the next game. He was starting or coming off injury reserve, so he didn't talk regularly to the media that much. And so somebody asked about him, and that was in his comment. You're like, whoa, and so anyway. Yeah, I don't know, but I don't expect much. They're not very forthright in with injuries at all, other than I'm sure with a Jones or a Hall, they'll say, yeah, they had good surgery. They're coming great in their rehab. But he said that all off season about Conklin and Wills and, Jones last year. And we were all led to believe they were going to all be ready for off season, let alone training camp, let alone the season.
Right.
And Conklin didn't start the season. Wills didn't start the season. Jones was the only one of the three that started the season. So I don't know. It's a lot of it, they give it away by moves they make in the draft, but before that in free agency. I mean, if they attack linebacker, in a big way, or they attack, defensive tackle or something, even though they probably could anyway,
Right.
I still think that they'll say that Hall and Jones are well on their way to being ready for the offseason, but I don't know what they'll say about JOK.
Right. Question from Kelly Black here. Who will get cut? Now, we're looking forward to the 2025 season. Cuts will happen to try to avoid picking up another year of a non-guaranteed contract. I got a couple candidates. Juan Thornhill, I think, is a candidate. You should be looking over his shoulder. And even Okoronkwo might be a candidate, given the size of their salaries and their production on the field. You anticipate any surprises, Fred? Any big names to get released?
Well, long before the Myles Garrett demand, Andrew Berry in his season end said he didn't anticipate moving away from many core players. I don't know who he considers core player. I mean, with Garrett's situation, if they had anything, right now they don't have a starter opposite Garrett because they had Zadarius Smith, traded him. So it just comes down to the evaluation with these Isaiah McGuire, Alex Wright, and Okoronkwo. Obviously, McGuire and Wright are cheaper options. You got, I think Maurice Hurst was a 1-year thing. He finished on IR again. So I don't know who all these guys are under contract. I'd have to look at my list again off the top of my head. But I think Juan Thornhill, I mean, I feel they'll move on from him. They swung big for John Johnson. Not good. Swung big for Thornhill. He was supposed to be a ball hawking safety. He hasn't had an interception. I don't know why. I mean, when you look at, maybe it's just in the scheme they're in, but you thought you were getting a Super Bowl, really top end safety. So they may try again, go that route, because I can't see them drafting unless they think Ronnie Hickman's ready to start. That's really the only guy you have on the team right now that's played. I mean, DeAnthony Bell is a free agent. I think he's restricted, so they could re-sign him, but he didn't play. He was special teams leader in tackles. So it's either Hickman, Delpit are your only two starters if you move on from Thornhill, unless you sign a free agent. And that very well could be. That's what Barry's done. He's taken two big swings. Maybe the third time will be a charm. But, yeah, they got some pressing needs. I don't think they're going to cut Jack Conklin, as a lot of people think, I could see him restructure his contract. But some of the guys are free agents, like Jed Wills. I don't think they'll re-sign him. I don't know who's, as far as maybe Ethan Posick. If they feel there's some options at center, I think he's got 1 year left on his contract, and I think it's like $7 million, and I don't think it's guaranteed. So the guy on the roster now is Luke Whippler from Ohio State. They drafted, I think, with the idea he would be the center by next year, but then he broke his leg or missed all this year, so he got no chance to develop this year. So I don't know what they think, if they want to turn it over to somebody like that right off the bat. So I think trading out Posick, for a free agent. If you can get a free agent, in here, I think there's one place for the Packers. I think his name's Myers from Ohio State.
Mm-hmm.
That might be an option. But yeah, right now, I don't know about. Those are the only cuts I see is possibly Posick or Thornhill, maybe Okoronkwo. Yeah.
Right, right. Well, I tell you what, we are bumping up against it here. It is pretty much 8 o'clock. So I've still got some questions left over. We'll have to hit them next week. A lot of good questions about quarterback and some other positions that we weren't able to get to. But I want to thank everyone for their participation in the chat. As always, I am reading your comments constantly throughout the course of the show. Trying to figure out what it is that you're interested in, and really appreciate the feedback, the questions, the comments, all that sort of stuff during the show. You guys really make the show with your input. So with that being said, Fred and I will be back here again next Wednesday night at 7 o'clock with the combine underway. And
should be talking from Indianapolis is the plan.
Yep, that is the plan. So you will not have the nice OBR background. You'll have some hotel room in the background or Airbnb in the background. But we'll be back again next Wednesday night at 7 o'clock for another edition of OBR Weekly. Thanks for hanging out with us. We'll see you then. Good night.
Thanks for seeing it.